Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arielle V. King, and welcome to the Green Jobs Pavilion's urban planning panel. I am an environmental justice strategist and the host of the Joy Report podcast by Intersectional Environmentalist. My background is in environmental justice, environmental law, and civil rights. And urban planning has always been a field that I have been interested in learning more about. So I am extremely excited about our panel today. For those who aren't aware, urban planning is the process of developing and designing land use and the built environment including air, water, and the infrastructure passing into and out of urban areas, such as transportation, communications, distribution networks, and their accessibility. This industry touches and intersects with multiple sectors, and the need to ensure that cities are adequately prepared to mitigate and adapt to the impacts of the climate crisis is more urgent than ever. And that's why I am so excited to be joined by such esteemed panelists today. So we're going to go this way, and I'm going to just have each of you introduce yourselves and share maybe what made you interested in urban planning initially? Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Max Levitsky. I work at Solar One. We're a nonprofit based here in New York City with a broad focus on making access to the clean energy economy better for all New Yorkers and something that can be achieved by all New Yorkers. And we do that through educational programs, community solar enrollment for LMI communities, and also workforce development training for primarily under and unemployed folks across the city. Urban planning, I think, is at the core of anything environmental, right? And as we think of resilience and we've already said mitigation and adaptation, we have to continue to incorporate the environment in anything new that happens to the city, but also think about what we need to change to make sure that we are, preparing ourselves for, unfortunately, more historically dangerous weather events that are bound to come our way, especially here in New York City. So it's just, it's at the core of everything we do at Solar One tangentially, I would say. Whereas a lot of our work is people focused, but it really comes back to the impact that has on an urban development.
Amazing. I mean, and what other reason to have urban development than to prioritize people? Yes, wonderful. Next, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dunbar. I use they, them pronouns, and it's not working. Okay.
Uh-oh. I think we need another mic for
your microphone.
Does this one work? Okay, great.
Okay. You might have to do a switch up right now.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is McKenna Dunbar. I use they, them pronouns. And first and foremost, I consider myself an environmental justice practitioner. I'm a rural organizer, but right now my role is the principal of the Grid Foundry, where we are forging the backbone for modern infrastructure, really focused on the built environment and buildings. This is a question, what I'm about to ask you is a question I tend to ask new people that I meet, but can anyone guess the percentage that Americans spend indoors?
Oh.
You can, yeah.
60.
So someone said 65%, the percentage of Americans spending their times indoors. Anyone else? 85? Higher? Someone says higher in the back. Okay, so 85, 95, it's in the middle. 90, 91% of our lives as Americans are spent indoors. And the reason I'm passionate about urban planning and tangential infrastructure related to the built environment is thinking about how to create our indoor and to make our indoor environments safer, more efficient, and have our energy be more affordable, particularly through energy efficiency, electrification, and ultimately broader decarbonization frameworks. And I'm very passionate about the workforce aspect and have navigated plenty of initiatives with our environmental justice collaborators outside of the Central Virginia region and across many other states to focus on how we can get more innovative programming and just initiatives to support those who are under employed or lack the resources to get in these job sectors as it relates to buildings and HVAC and other forms of energy careers.
Thank you.
Does this work? There we go. Cool. Got it working. Hey everybody, my name is Neil Padukone. I am Director of Green Economic Transformation at the New York Climate Exchange. We are a relatively new organization that's developing a research and innovation campus on Governor's Island, which is a beautiful park space in the middle of New York Harbor, right between Manhattan and Brooklyn. And the idea is really to have this be a place for climate solutions, for research, education, convening, innovation, and kind of pilot and prototype solutions from across a national network of universities, nonprofits, and companies and businesses that are doing work in this space. And based on those solutions, scale them both across the city and further afield. And in my last role, I used to lead industrial strategy for the city of New York. And so that was kind of more the planning hat. But stepping back a bit into what got me into urban planning and urban development generally, I was born and raised here in New York. And so I still don't have a car. But it also means that I only got my license when I was about 25, 26, because it might be a nice thing to do. But in a previous career, I was working in New Delhi in India, and a lot of folks drive to get around. And because I'm a New Yorker, I was taking the bus and walking on the side of highways and everything to get around. And I realized, wow, this is a really poor transit system, particularly if millions of more people are going to be moving to cities as they anticipated was going to be happening in countries like India. And so I thought, how can we improve the systems and the transit systems that facilitate this? Because, if you can fit 3 people in a huge, 3-ton box that emits a ton of carbon and emits a ton of air pollution, or you can carry 50 to 100 to hundreds of people in a slightly larger box that emits a lot less per person. And so I got really interested in how that worked in places like India. But then when I came back home, I realized, I don't know, anybody, how many folks from New York here? So y'all have taken the subway, and particularly for the folks that are not from here who've taken the subway, you realize that we have a lot of work to do on our own transit system. So I came back home and I realized, okay, we do have a lot of work to do here on improving our transit and improving the way that we access space, that we are mobile. And in many ways, transportation is mobility, both physical but also kind of metaphorical. And it also feeds into a lot of the other conversations around, affordability, right? Like the reason denser areas are more expensive is because people have proximity and they don't have to waste money or time transporting. But if you have a better transit system that can move you quickly and reliably over farther distances, maybe you can live a little further away, pay a little less, but still have that same access. And so I went back to grad school and pivoted into urban development, and then joined city government, and worked a lot on kind of industrial policy, on how goods move and how supply chains work. And that is in my last perch working on industrial strategy. I realized that a lot of the work for kind of greening the economy really does reside in industry, right? In making things and how we make things and what we make, in moving things and how we get things around, and what we get around, and in maintaining things and repairing them. And so I moved over to the New York Climate Exchange about a year ago to really focus on that piece. And that's where my portfolio now is on economic transformation of industrial systems, but also workforces. And that's
Thank you.
just here.
Thank you so much. So my first question is, what is urban resilience in the context of climate work and in urban planning? And yeah, why is it essential for folks to learn about urban resilience at this moment? I guess from the context of each of your industries. Whoever wants to go first.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah. No, whatever feels right.
For me, particularly in the realm of the built environment and for buildings, again, going back to that fact, 91% of our lives spent indoors, thinking about urban resilience really means thinking about, as temperature increases, as electrification spreads, as we think, at least I'm from Virginia, or I live in Virginia, I'm from DC, but thinking about how energy demand is going to triple in the next 15, 20 years and how that will impact energy prices and increase energy burdens for anyone, no matter of your socioeconomic background, tying that to resilience and thinking about how we can make communities more resilient and how we can make the buildings that those communities and individuals occupy more resilient through building performance standards, thinking about the tangible improvements, the retrofits, the weatherization, thinking about the small things that aren't actually so small, the building envelope, thinking about the actual delivery of that electricity, and thinking really tangibly about, or road practically about, the type of systems that when those older, less efficient appliances need to be, maintained or need to be replaced, what type of more resilient appliances can be implemented, and also making sure that the workforce development and the workforce initiatives behind these sectors, whether it's unions or non-unions, are resilient as well, and that there's practical educational opportunities for rank and file laborers to actually learn how to maintain and support our energy efficiency journey as energy demand increases. There's resiliency both in having the tool of energy efficiency and then having the outcome of building decarbonization. Because building decarbonization ultimately, I think, is an outcome, because it's not just electrifying appliances. It's also thinking about grid reliability. It's also thinking about the workforce that will deliver that grid reliability and the electrification. And it's also thinking about embodied carbon and scope 1, 2, 3 emissions and how that all intersects. And then energy efficiency and improving energy efficiency in the form of resilience is about the technology and, of course, some workforce applications behind it. But for me, I'm really focused on not just, urban areas. It's also rural environments. I was personally raised as an organizer in rural parts of Virginia, but resiliency to improve people and the conditions that people live in on the day to day.
Beautiful. Thank you. Other contributions on urban resilience?
I'll go really quick because I wanted to amplify McKenna's points about the workforce and
Yeah.
bring it back to my comment about, Solar One is very people centric. And a lot of the work that I'm personally involved with is workforce development. And I think that resiliency in an urban environment inherently is we're playing a type of defense, right? And it's an unfortunate defense that we have to play given the situation that we're in with the current state of the climate. But in a way, it's creating opportunities for us to kind of rethink systems and how things have been done historically, right? And when we think of workforce and people-centric solutions, that's an opportunity to, present these jobs and these new, career paths to communities that have been most impacted by the climate crisis. Solar One does a lot of work with environmental justice communities across the city where we provide hands-on hard skills training in the broader sector, as well as classical trades such as carpentry, electrical, plumbing fields. And these are all, areas that have a lot of skills that can open pathways in multitude of directions for folks. And they could find jobs that maybe at the forefront of a lot of our minds aren't climate jobs, green jobs, but we kind of, in my opinion, need to move away from that concept as a whole. Because if we're going to be more resilient, all jobs have to incorporate this concept of how can we conserve more energy? How can we be thoughtful of, the side effects of the materials we're using and the process we're using? So, again, it really comes back to the people, and it also is most beneficial for people at the end of the day. Yeah.
Thank you. That really, I just want to reiterate that every job is a climate job. And we should continue to think about it in that way. And I think the more that we are learning about climate and providing that baseline, the more we can apply that lens to whatever other work that we are focusing on. Do you have other contributions on resilience?
Insofar as the kind of the two sides of climate work or climate interventions being sort of mitigation or decarbonization, reducing the amount of carbon that we emit into the environment, and the other side being adaptation or adjusting to the inevitability, I guess, on some level. And sorry, I'm going to keep rooting this in New York just because it's my lived reality. But in ways that we didn't like growing up, rain was rain, right? It rained, it's gonna rain. But now every time it rains, the streets are flooded, the subways are flooded, basements are flooded, and that's because we had stormwater systems that were designed for receiving about 2 or 3 inches of rain per hour. Now we get about 4 or 5, right? And so the fact is that climate change is making this almost inevitable. Our skies are getting orange because Canadian wildfires are spreading smoke as far south as here. Temperatures are getting really, really hot in the summer. And so despite the work that we need to do to decarbonize, to reduce emissions, to reduce just ambient heat from our infrastructure systems, we also need to adapt to the realities that these things are going to happen, because they are happening. And so I would kind of understand resiliency as being that piece of the puzzle. But that's why I think you guys made a really important point, that like at the end of the day, that work needs to be done to do those things. And we need people with the skills to do those things. And I'm really glad that you started on that question, Arielle, because very often in the climate world, in the climate jobs world, we talk a lot about solar installation, offshore wind, all these really important and necessary pieces of the decarbonization workforce. But there's this huge body of work regarding adapting to the inevitabilities of this work that, frankly, we don't have as much of a kind of taxonomy around. What does this economy look like? What does this work look like? What are the funding mechanisms to do it? And what are the career pathways within it? And I think on some level, just because of this inevitability, we'll have to create all of that. But I'm really glad that you started this conversation with that, because it's such a big part of it.
Thank you so much. I think we've been talking about this a little bit, but I'm curious if one of you, and then others can add on, would be able to describe the difference between building electrification and decarbonization. What are the differences? And how should we distinguish them as we're considering different pathways and careers in urban planning?
So a little bit mentioned earlier, I consider building electrification to be a tool in the climate, I like the word that you just used, interventions toolbox, whereby you're thinking about and transforming the systems in a building, those that cook and cool and heat, and do other processes within a building, to electrified equipment, electrified systems. And with that, these systems are more energy efficient. But the thing about building electrification is important to note, is that electrifying equipment and appliances does not mean that those appliances or equipment are using clean energy, because a big distinguished aspect of building electrification and decarbonization is seeking to reduce the amount of fossil fuels in the built environment, similar to building electrification. But if we are not making the renewable energy mix more profound in a given state or area, or if that electricity that the electrified appliance is using, comes from coal instead of solar, that is something that we need to tackle in the future as well. And I know everyone has different perspectives about all of the above energy resources versus predominantly 100% renewable energy. But that is just to note that building electrification does not necessarily mean electrified appliances come from clean, renewable, 100% renewable sources of energy. Typically, they don't. With decarbonization, as mentioned before, I view it as an outcome. Again, reducing embodied carbon, thinking about how the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions alongside operational supply chains are carried out, and also thinking about the holistic interventions of grid reliability and workforce development, and also thinking about how, at least in my perspective, building performance standards and other more data access and other regulatory bodies and interventions can reduce our overall carbon footprint, for lack of it.
Thank you. Other things to add on?
I have a couple quick things. McKenna covered a lot of the concepts. I won't reiterate any of that. But what I find interesting at this point is, I think decarbonization and building electrification have become such buzzwords in the community that's wearing the silent disco headphones here right now. Like we all know, I think, what that means. I'm generalizing, but if you just walk down the street after you exit the Javits Center. I don't know what percent of people know what those words mean if they're not involved in the space, or they maybe haven't been exposed to them in their work or something, right? So it suffers from this kind of, it's not pretentiousness, but like it makes it more complicated than it really needs to be for, I think, a layperson. And the lay people everywhere are the ones that are going to be most impacted by the rising cost of electricity if we don't take care of the decarbonization aspect to make the electricity more affordable. Because at the end of the day, a lot of folks, that's like their number one most important factor, right? I mean, we just saw that Zoran won the primary and he ran on affordability. Yeah. And affordability appeals to all constituents and is so bipartisan. And as much as we want all of our appliances to be electric because they're not, if they're more efficient, we're only benefiting from that if the energy going into it, as McKenna said, is clean. So they are inherently linked, and I wish they were both rising at the same level, but our decarbonization metrics are being threatened by the federal government right now. And I think, like us as New Yorkers, New York City and the state, we have a lot of great legislation and policies in place to continue the hard work we've done. But yeah, it's difficult to see how things are going to move forward.
Absolutely. This sounds like a great opportunity also for increased communication and community engagement to ensure that communities understand these topics and we aren't using this jargon that excludes communities because they have the lived experience, right? And yeah, they will care once they understand just how deeply connected all of this work truly is. So we've shared a few already, but I'm curious, what are some other green trades you would encourage young people or people transitioning to a new career to pursue?
I might start by just saying, I might be jumping ahead here, but if I could go back in time, I would listen to my South Asian immigrant parents and get an engineering degree. Just because in the work that I've come around to doing, I have a policy background and did that in undergrad. But I keep finding that, like, on one hand, just understanding the technical systems that I work with would have been a lot easier. And frankly, it also just would have made like home repair and installing things a lot easier as well. But I also think it just, like, when I meet folks that have an engineering or electrical background or mechanical background, they're just able to approach both technical and policy problems with a really interesting perspective. So that's just kind of my like disciplinary
Yeah.
idea. But I do want to come back to your point about the point that was raised about every job being a climate job,
Yes.
because truly every skill is needed here. At the Climate Exchange, a lot of what we work on is helping folks realize that reality. Because, for instance, we talk about green jobs very often, but like people that do green jobs don't think they're doing green jobs, right? Like a welder could be welding an oil tank today, but could be welding a wind turbine tomorrow. A financier could be putting together a term sheet for a gas field today, but could be financing a solar farm tomorrow. And it's just leveraging the skills that you do have, that anybody has, in the service of the work that we all need to get done. And I think that, regardless of what your background is, regardless of what your skill set is, I think just finding that Venn diagram of what your skills are, what your passion are is, and what this type of work needs is, where we need to go.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna do one maybe final penultimate question. What role do you see, or I'm like chat for time. What are some resources that you would recommend for people to learn more about urban planning generally or specifically within your industry? If there are conferences or books or newsletters or blogs that you like to follow, yeah, let's share with the group.
This is place specific, but it's also not place specific. I live in Richmond, Virginia, and have for almost 7 years now, and I'm deeply engaged in the code refresh process and what that essentially refers to. In Richmond, Virginia, the last time they had a process to think about how the city is laid out, thinking about the like max height for certain development, what are going to be the economic hubs for Richmond, and thinking about how green space is laid out in tandem with the Parks and Rec, department, thinking about, concessions for stormwater management improvement and just the general layout and feel of the city. That hasn't been done in 50 years in the city of Richmond. And typically cities and locations do it a bit more frequently. I would really encourage you all to look into the efforts of your respective, places planning department. I saw that half of you, or a little under half of you are from New York, but for those New York City, and so I'm not honestly particularly familiar with the planning processes for the state here, but for those who live in maybe not so big cities or just other cities, really look into code refresh processes. Think about attending the different commissions that your city has. In Richmond, I'm pretty sure we have 54 commissions, which is really wild. And I attend probably 4 or 5 meetings a month just as a citizen for a few of them. And that has helped me a lot as a technical advisor, as leading a boutique consultancy firm on infrastructure, thinking about how to navigate power relationships as a rural organizer, seeing who shows up to the spaces and thinking about, okay, this city councilor is supportive of this development. These groups of individuals who are commenting during public process or procedure are not into XYZ. Why is that? Like, you're really able to investigate, and this ties into community engagement. You're really able to investigate the proceedings of the place that you live when you attend these spaces, because typically there's not that many like civilians who attend it. So I have used that as an educational tool for the past 7 years, and I highly recommend you all to.
Thank you. What other resources would you recommend?
I have a fairly different answer. I just think you should read The Power Broker to figure out how New York became the way it is today, and a lot of the setbacks and lack of efficiency we see in our infrastructure are very closely tied to the effect of Robert Moses. And I would go as far to say that if you're a transplant like me who's lived in New York over 10 years now, you don't get your New York chip after 10 years. You get after you read The Power Broker, because it really did open my eyes in a way to understand how we've got to where we are. And I think if there was a modern power broker, we would be talking about resiliency and what that would look like, and how we need to change the way that the city works and operates and is set up and takes care of its people.
Thank you. Neil, do you have any?
I have a couple of very tactical things. Just out of the gate, follow Solar One, the Grid Foundry, and New York Climate Exchange on LinkedIn. There's always a lot of fun stuff going on. And specifically, Solar One just opened a really cool educational facility on the east side.
Yes, I wanted to squeeze that in, but thanks, Neil. I'll give a real spiel really quick. Yeah, so we did just open a brand new facility on the East River on the FDR Drive and 23rd Street. It's a beautiful new building that's roughly 6,500 square feet. It's solar powered. It has a battery backup system. It's made with energy efficient, eco-conscious materials, and it's part of Psycho Park, which was unfortunately mostly gutted with the East Coast Resiliency Project, but has since been kind of revamped and is very beautiful with a lot of native plants that Solar One staff takes care of on behalf of NYC EDC. It's a beautiful building, and we just opened it almost 3 weeks ago now. So we're going to have a lot more events and opportunities for folks to learn about not just Solar One's work, but what you can do from an environmental stewardship standpoint across New York City. So yeah, it's going to be a great educational resource. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
I got a couple other plugs real quick. One, if you are not in New York and you are looking to get involved in this kind of work, check out a relatively new organization called Civic Match, which is trying to get more folks involved in local government wherever they are. For the folks that are in New York that are interested in this work, I cannot, just from my own experience working in New York City government, I cannot advocate it enough. I have so much respect for all of my former colleagues, and just the work that they do to show up every day. And like, frankly, regardless of who's at the head of New York City government. I just know that we're in good hands because of my old colleagues, and you should be one of those colleagues. Just because there's so much good work that can be done through the levers of government, and you get to see the outcome of your work every day in a really impactful way. On a kind of extracurricular side, I want to tip a hat to my colleague Tiffany Ann at the Regional Plan Association, who used to run the diversity committee of the American Planning Association's New York Metro chapter. She had started with a handful of her colleagues a conference called the Hindsight Conference, which was really focused on kind of changing up the way the planning field, the urban planning field, was done, to move it away from the legacy of Robert Moses and into communities and get community perspectives on what urban planning ought to look like. And it was this beautiful conference that happened every year. It happened in multiple languages. It happened in, different, like there were sessions about delivery and freight planning by delivery bicycle workers in Chinese. It was just such a cool conference. Hindsight no longer exists because it was integrated into how the American Planning Association does all of its conferences. So I just thought that was a really powerful
Thank you.
experience that everyone should learn from.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We have come to the end of our panel discussion. I want to thank you all for joining us and for being a part of the conversation today. To our listeners, please follow the organizations and follow our incredible panelists. I have one recommendation of a resource for you. It's a book called The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. It provides a broader scale, like a national scope, to the conversation that the other book references, specifically to New York City, and really talks about the history of redlining and kind of how we got to where we are right now. And I think really enforces the need to create resilience and build community power. So thank you all for listening.